Hello, William here with the Grand Duke Dmitri YouTube series. I'm on Dmitri's balcony at Schatzalp. It was Sanatorium Schatzalp when he was staying here. Now it's a hotel. And I've already mentioned that several times, so forgive me for that. Yeah, we're still in 1910. I decided to go on to another 1910 letter, although I'm doing it kind of willy-nilly because today's letter, thank you to Laura, a viewer who informed me that there are newspaper articles describing Dimitri's visit to Turku in 1910, and they're dated in February. And so that letter was completely undated, so that was very useful to know. So this letter is going back several months to February 1910. So our recap from that September letter, Dmitri was preparing. He was preparing for steeplechases. Probably not yet. Maybe, I don't know if he was already preparing for the Olympics. But anyway, he'd had a nasty fall from his horse, but he took it all in stride. He defended Maria to Aunt Marie, who was talking about all these rumors she'd heard from Sweden about Maria behaving very strangely there and offending people, and Dmitri got rather heated and defended his sister, quite right, and Aunt Marie backed down and said, well, she personally didn't believe the rumors. Now, Aunt Marie will also figure in this letter from February, and I still don't know who she is, because later in the same letter, Dmitri will refer both to Aunt Minnie, the Dowager Empress, and Aunt Michin. I still think this Aunt Marie is probably Michin, but it could be Maria Georgievna. It could be the sister of Dmitri's late mother. That's a possibility. Either that or Michin. But that aunt was also called, Maria Georgievna was also called Minnie. And in this letter, Dmitri refers to the Dowager Empress as Aunt Minnie the Elder. So he, and in the 1906, 1907 letters, he certainly referred to Maria Georgievna as Aunt Minnie, or Aunt Minnie the Younger. So yeah, my guess is that Aunt Marie is Michin. And why he's calling her that in the first part of the letter, I don't know. So in the previous letter, he also mentioned going skating with Irina, who would have been, about 13 years old, and that she was a very good skater. And he made this weird comment at the end, Lieutenant Rudebek is no longer my lover. And it was clearly a joke, but kind of funny. Okay, so 7th February, 1910, he starts by writing under the date, still at Tsarskoye Selo. My poor but good Maria, you are, of course, absolutely right when you call me a pig, both in your heart and in front of others, because I haven't written you even a single word. I truly agree completely with the epithet you have given me, and now, realizing that it's been almost a month since I wrote you, I feel terribly ashamed. All the arguments that I could, given my position, bring forward in defense of myself, such as I didn't have time, I'm busy, I didn't know what to write, all of that is pointless. Firstly, because you wouldn't believe me, and you would be right, and secondly, because none of it is true. I didn't write simply because I was lazy. Twice I picked up my pen, and twice I took a sheet of paper. Twice I started writing, but it all went to the devil. Nothing came out. But enough self-flagellation. It's time to move on to more interesting topics. I'll start with life in Tsarskoye Selo. Everything's the same as always, only Aunt Alex seems even weaker. She's still just lying on the sofa with the same nasty expression. The wonderful person of Madame Vyrubova is seen in Tsarskoye Selo on a daily basis, and I personally find it more and more repulsive. Naturally, one hears nothing of Grigory, but from the most trustworthy sources, I know that he is at Vyrubova's and often sees the Empress. Not long ago, Aunt Marie said that Olga Alexandrovna had visited Aunt Alex and they went together to Vyrubova's and Grigory was there. He used the informal you with Olga, as he does with the Empress, and shocked her with his insolent tone. All this is a secret. Okay, we'll stop there. That's about the first half of the letter, maybe a little less. The self-flagellation, so-called, is very typical of Dmitri. He was always ready to acknowledge when he did something wrong. There's a little bit of sarcasm to it, of course, but he truly was always willing to take other people's criticism into account. And to be honest about it. That's one of the things that really drew me to him when I was doing my dissertation and studying all the Grand Dukes. He was living at Tsarskoye Selo, apparently. He was attending the Nicholas Cavalry School in Petersburg. And you remember possibly from the 1908, or was it the 1909 letters? Well, the 1908 letters, before Grand Duke Alexei Alexandrovich died, the plan was for Dmitri to live with him, to live with Grand Duke Alexei Alexandrovich. Dmitri was 18 as of this letter, but Grand Dukes didn't reach their majority till they were 21, and they didn't have full control over their estates until they were 25. So I don't know. Maybe it was thought that it was better for him to live at Tsarskoye Selo, where there were people who would keep an eye on him. He could be a little bit wild, not as much as people tend to think, actually, but maybe they didn't want him to have a chance to start that habit of being every day at the yacht club and that sort of thing. So this is a great picture of life at Tsarskoye Selo. So he was living there. He was right there on the spot to see what was going on. He mentions, Alex seems to be weaker. He doesn't actually come right out and call her a hypochondriac. It would be a little bit hypocritical if he were to do so. He himself had these bouts of weakness when he was stressed out. He would complain about sort of mysterious weakness. But anyway, Alex is lying on the sofa with the same nasty expression on her face. What does he interpret as a nasty expression? I don't know. Is it something personal? Does he feel a little bit like she doesn't want him around? Yeah, impossible to say, but interesting. So Vyrubova, he's been living off and on at Tsarskoye for a while, but this is the first time. Maybe he's really more en famille this time. I don't know, but this is the first time he talks about either Anna Vyrubova, Alex's best friend and lady-in-waiting, and also the first time he mentions Rasputin. So yeah, Vyrubova is a fixture there. She's there on a daily basis. He doesn't like her. He finds her repulsive. I don't think she was particularly bright, and she kind of had a dependent personality, I think. And she wasn't the best looking woman in the world. Dmitri tended to be critical of people who were overweight, so maybe that was part of it. But probably just, she's there, she's got the Empress's full attention, and who knows what. Anyway, he doesn't like her being there. And what else? One hears nothing of Grigory. Okay, so they're being discreet about Rasputin. I've actually contributed to 2 books on Rasputin, but I've never been that interested in the man himself. So I've only contributed in the sense of providing things from Dmitri, but I don't know how early on he appeared how early on he was taken up by Alexandra, that I just don't know. But clearly, there are people around in a palace, even in a very, situation, not so grand situation, like the court in Tsarskoye was not so grand because Nicholas and Alexandra didn't want it to be. They wanted to lead this quiet family life, but still there are people around. There are aides de camp, so-called Flügel adjutants. There are servants. There are visitors. There are relatives coming and going. Dmitri being one of them, and so when he says naturally, in other words, it's not surprising that one hears nothing of Grigori. But he has learned from the most trustworthy or the most reliable sources that Grigori is at Vyrubova's and often sees the Empress. I think Vyrubova had a house within the palace grounds or in Tsarskoye Selo nearby. And this clearly is kept a secret, even though everybody certainly knows when the Empress goes out, one would think. So Dmitri has found out from reliable sources that the Empress is going off to Vyrubova's, that Rasputin is there, and that Alexandra visits there. Oh, I've lost my cursor, so I can't scroll down. There it is. The sunlight is so bright here. I hope you can see me all right. Okay, and Dmitri has a tendency to call Rasputin Grigori or Grishka, although he does also say Rasputin sometimes. Okay. Olga's meeting with Rasputin, I think, is very well known. Olga Alexandrovna's, because I think that she wrote about it at some point, whether in a diary entry or I don't know what, but she wrote about it, and I think she said the same thing, that Dmitri has now heard, not at Tsarskoye itself, but he's heard it from Aunt Marie. Aunt Marie told him that Olga had gone to Vyrubova's with Alexandra and seen Rasputin, and was taken aback by the fact that she was addressed as thou or ti in the informal you, and that he was very insolent with her. Now Olga was probably the last member of the imperial family to stand on ceremony. She was a very down-to-earth person, but nonetheless this shocked her. Aunt Marie found out about it and told Dmitri about it. But Dmitri then, of course, cautions his sister at the end of what he's writing about Rasputin. All this is a secret. All right, so what do we have next time? Well, we have some very interesting text. One of the reasons I decided to do this letter is because it has such interesting text. I'd kind of forgotten about it. There's a huge, very long paragraph about Alexei and his health and the doctors and Alexandra, how she's treating him. Really fascinating, really an insider's view. Come back for that. And I hope to see you then. Bye.